He didn't see it coming. That's the part that always gets people, not because he was naive, not because he was careless, but because the people dismantling him had been smiling at him in the halls for 11 years, shaking his hand at retreats, calling him indispensable. And then one morning, without warning, without cause, and without a single ounce of shame, they handed him a box. His name was Daniel Reeves, Director of Systems Architecture at Umax Technologies. 12 years, 2 platform rebuilds. 1 system migration that had saved the company from a federal compliance collapse that would have cost them their operating license. He was, in every sense that actually matters in technology, the man who built the house. But before we get to how they burned it down, there are 4 questions this story needs to answer, and none of them are what you expect. Question 1. How do you fire the only person who knows where every wire runs and not realize you just pulled the pin? Question 2. Why did the compliance system trigger an alert 11 days after Daniel left on a file that, according to company records, no longer existed? Question 3. Who signed the override that buried a federal audit flag 6 weeks before Daniel was terminated, and why does that signature look exactly like his? Question 4. Daniel won. The board came back. Justice landed. So why, when he finally opened the file they sent him, did he close the laptop and sit in the dark for an hour without moving? Keep those in mind. Everyone has an answer. The last one will change how you see the whole story. And if you love stories like this, that lean into real-life examples of corporate and business deception and crime, then click the subscribe button now. We are dedicated to bringing you more content made specifically to your taste. Now let's start the story. This kind of betrayal has allegedly happened before. One of the most reported cases in American business history makes the pattern impossible to ignore. It was reported that in 2001, analysts inside Enron allegedly watched their own leadership dismantle the controls, keeping a massive financial fraud invisible, and one of them, a woman named Sharon Watkins, reportedly sent a direct warning to the top. According to widely reported accounts, she was quietly removed from any role where she could cause damage. 7 months later, Enron allegedly collapsed, reportedly wiping out $74 billion in shareholder value and the retirement savings of 20,000 employees. What people forget about Watkins is that she didn't just warn them, she documented everything. She kept copies. She reportedly built the paper trail that helped prosecutors dismantle the scheme. She didn't win because she was loud. She won because she was methodical. Daniel Reeves had reportedly never heard of Sharon Watkins when he quietly started copying files, but he was about to write the same chapter. Umax Technologies made enterprise compliance software. Fortune 500 companies used it to manage regulatory filings and audit trails, infrastructure that, if it broke, didn't just crash a dashboard. It exposed clients to federal liability. Daniel had built the backbone of that platform. The kind of engineer who showed up at 6 in the morning not because anyone asked, but because a migration was running and he wanted to watch it personally. He had a scar on his left hand from a server rack incident in 2019 that nobody at the company remembered except him. That was the kind of person he was. He kept track. He remembered everything. The new CEO, Preston Walsh, came from sales. He spoke in sports metaphors. He walked into technical briefings, nodded for 8 minutes, and said things like, "Great, but can we make it simpler?" Preston had a son, Kyle Walsh, MBA from a school nobody on the engineering team recognized, confidence that bore no relationship to his competence. Kyle had a habit of calling legacy infrastructure dead weight, the same infrastructure that was keeping the company out of federal litigation. Preston had been positioning Kyle to take over operations for months, the worst-kept secret in the building. Daniel had watched it happen with the patient calm of a man already making contingency plans, because he understood what Preston was really proposing. Stripping the compliance architecture down to what Kyle could understand was not innovation. It was a controlled demolition. He just didn't know yet that he was the target. If you're enjoying this episode, please take a second to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It will really help our channel grow and be able to continue to support you with great content. Thanks. On a Tuesday in October, Daniel was called into a glass-walled conference room. Preston, HR Director Lena Cole, a man from legal named Ferris that Daniel had never seen before. Preston didn't sit. He leaned, said they were moving in a new direction. agility, Kyle taking over, a leaner structure. Daniel asked one question: who's handling the federal compliance snapshot in December? Preston smiled. Kyle's team will figure it out. Daniel looked at Lena. She was looking at the table. He handed over his badge, walked out. His desk had already been cleared, which meant they had planned this more than a day in advance. He sat in his car for 3 minutes, not crying, not calling anyone, just sitting with his hands on the wheel, running through the architecture in his head. Counting the things Kyle wouldn't know how to find, counting the things that were about to go wrong. Then he started the car and drove home. 2 days after Daniel left, Kyle held what he called an alignment session. He announced they were retiring the legacy compliance module and replacing it with a third-party integration his contact had recommended. No review. No sign-off from the systems team. The systems team said nothing because 3 of them had already started job hunting. Kyle killed the legacy module on a Friday afternoon. 11 days later, at 3:17 in the morning, an automated compliance daemon embedded deep in the platform's core sent a single alert to an external monitoring address. Core audit fallback triggered, signature chain broken, federal snapshot window at risk. The address wasn't a Umax email. It was a personal account Daniel had registered 2 years earlier under a business name that existed entirely on paper. He had built the tripwire himself. He had hoped he would never need it. He had just never let himself believe that was guaranteed. He had his answer now. He didn't sleep that night. He poured a glass of water, sat at his kitchen table, and began making calls. But then something else happened. Something that wasn't part of his plan, and that stopped him cold. At 2:41 in the morning, his personal cell phone buzzed. Unknown number. He picked up. There was a pause. Then a voice he didn't recognize said 4 words, low and flat. Back off. Last chance. The line went dead. He set the phone down on the table, looked at it for a long moment. Then he picked it up again, found the number for the journalist he'd been told to contact if things went sideways, and sent a single text. Ready to talk. If you liked this episode, subscribe to the channel. If you want to make sure the algorithm doesn't skip you, then join my email notification list and never miss an episode. The link is in the description below. When Umax's outside auditors flagged a gap in the December snapshot chain, the board began pulling logs. What they found was a single override command entered 6 weeks before Daniel's termination. A command that had suppressed a federal audit flag and rerouted the notification to a dead internal mailbox. The signature attached to that command was Daniel's credentials. His login, his timestamp, his digital signature. Preston was in the chairman's office within the hour. Printed log in hand, the expression of a man who had waited 2 years for this moment. Daniel sabotaged the system on his way out. This is why we made the change. This is vindication. The chairman, Elise Harmon, co-founder of Umax, reviewed the log carefully. Then she asked one question. What time was the override entered? Preston checked. 11:47 at night, on a Thursday. Pull his badge logs for that night, she said. That's not really. Pull them. The badge logs showed Daniel had left the building at 6:08 in the evening and had not returned. The override had been entered from inside the building, from a workstation on the 4th floor, at 11:47 at night. Daniel had been gone for over 5 hours. The forensics was not complicated, they were just thorough. The workstation that entered the override allegedly belonged to a junior analyst named Tyler Bryce, hired 8 months earlier, 3 weeks after Kyle Walsh arrived. His references had reportedly never been called. Tyler had allegedly accessed Daniel's credential profile using a cached session token, a technical vulnerability that Daniel had flagged in a security review 14 months earlier. The patch ticket he had filed had been marked low priority by Kyle. Kyle had reportedly approved the ticket backlog his first week and allegedly marked 7 security patches as non-critical. One of them was the session token exposure, the exact one Tyler Bryce allegedly used to impersonate Daniel's login from a building Daniel was no longer in. The impossible signature was not impossible. It was allegedly a frame. Elise Harmon called Preston at 7 the next morning. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Did you know? Preston said no. The forensics team spent 11 days determining whether that was true. According to the investigation, it was not. Now here is the part the press release didn't cover. Because the boardroom scene that followed is the part that everyone who was in that room would later describe in the same way, quietly. Like people who had watched something they couldn't unsee. Preston walked in believing he still had control of the narrative. He had prepared remarks. He had a lawyer beside him. He had the look of a man who had spent 11 days building a story. Elise Harmon let him speak for 4 minutes. Then she slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was the badge log, Preston's name, the night in question. A second access entry from Preston's own credentials recorded at the building 9 minutes before Tyler Bryce's workstation had entered the override. He had been there. He had watched it happen. He had said nothing. The lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Preston's face did not change, but his prepared remarks stayed on the table, unspoken, for the rest of the meeting. Things moved fast after that, as they do when a company is staring at federal liability and someone is finally asking the right questions. Kyle Walsh's access was suspended within 48 hours. Preston Walsh submitted his resignation the same afternoon, though the board statement carefully avoided the word fired. Tyler Bryce was terminated, and within 3 weeks was allegedly the subject of a criminal referral to the Department of Justice for unauthorized computer access and credential fraud. The federal compliance snapshot was repaired. Daniel's archived documentation, 3 years of it, backed up to a private cloud instance since the first time Preston had talked about retiring the legacy module, was restored in a 72-hour emergency rebuild. Umax's board offered Daniel a consulting contract, senior technical advisor, flexible terms, compensation reportedly more than he had been making before. He accepted. The man who built the house watched the arsonists get caught, but then the board sent him a file. It was a routine disclosure packet, the kind circulated after a forensic review. Daniel sat down with it on a Sunday evening, glass of water on the table, the same focused stillness he brought to every technical document. He reviewed it in 40 minutes. Then he closed the laptop, sat in the dark for an hour without moving. Buried in the forensic summary, in a section labeled Ancillary Findings, was something investigators had flagged as outside the scope of the primary case. A data transfer log, automated, recurring, running for 19 months on a background process allegedly disguised as a routine telemetry sync. Every month for 19 months. A compressed archive of Umax's client compliance data had allegedly been sent to an external server, not by Kyle, not by Tyler Bryce, not by Preston Walsh. The originating credential allegedly belonged to Lena Cole, the HR director who had sat across from Daniel on the day they handed him a box, the woman who had looked at the table and said nothing. The external server reportedly traced to a competing compliance software firm, one that, in the 18 months since those transfers allegedly began, had won contracts from 4 of Umax's largest enterprise clients. Lena Cole had allegedly been employed by that firm for 7 months before she ever walked through Umax's doors. She wasn't an HR director, she was allegedly an insertion. Daniel knew what the board would do. He had studied enough corporate history to know. A quiet settlement. Non-disclosure clause. No criminal referral. No press release. Because if the full story surfaced that Umax's HR director had allegedly been a corporate spy for 19 months, that 4 major clients had reportedly been poached using stolen data, the company's stock wouldn't dip. It would crater. He had won. The system he built had protected the company he built it for. But somewhere in a quiet office, he would never see, the woman who had handed him that box was allegedly negotiating the terms of her silence. And the company he had just agreed to consult for was about to let her walk. He opened the laptop, stared at the screen for a moment. Then he opened a new document, titled it simply Notes, and began typing everything he knew, every detail, every timestamp, every connection between Lena Cole and the firm that had taken their clients. He saved it to 3 separate locations, 1 cloud, 1 cold storage, 1 printed and sealed in an envelope he addressed to a federal oversight contact, whose card he had kept in his wallet for 2 years without ever expecting to use. The board said they would handle it. Daniel believed them the way you believe a weather forecast useful, partially accurate, and beyond your control. So he made sure he had an umbrella ready. He went back to work on Monday, fixed 3 errors Kyle's team had introduced, documented everything, kept his backups current. Some people learn from what almost destroyed them. Others just make sure the next fire finds better suppression systems waiting. Daniel was the second kind. And this time, he was ready. If you liked this episode, subscribe to the channel. If you want to make sure the algorithm doesn't skip you, then join my email notification list and never miss an episode. The link is in the description below. On the screen is our next gripping story that you're sure to love. Click over to enjoy the next storyline. I see you there.